Cool. Okay, we're live. So welcome back to another episode of Cool Story Bro. I've got with me Emil, Lynn, and Moritz today. And today I'm going to touch on an interesting topic that's kind of topical at the moment in the news, and that's like all the things going on around, Jeffrey Epstein, his suicide, and kind of the wider picture of how these things fit together in the world we live in. I've seen some interesting takes on it, and obviously some interesting reaction on places like Twitter, where certain hashtags are being sort of tweaked and monitored to kind of shape influence and sort of perception. So how sort of the world we live in is really like perception is truth. I would say that's the way to kind of put it. And so from that perspective, I don't want to jump into sort of really depressing talk about the world and how it's fucked up. But I think that if you don't appreciate how the truth is sort of managed and perception is managed, then you're really missing out on a big chunk of reality. And so maybe from that perspective, we can approach the talk. Like I'm sure you guys all know, but just to kind of introduce the topic, there's a guy called Jeffrey Epstein who was quite well connected among all sort of a lot of the elite globally, but mostly in America is where it's coming out. And it turns out he was running these sex trafficking rings and bringing little girls in and probably blackmailing politicians and powerful people with this kind of strategy. So I think this it's a really powerful tool if you want to manipulate people. A lot of these really people in really powerful positions, they end up being blackmailed and intentionally put into these positions after that so that they can be controlled. And so I think the world we live in, we think we live in a democracy where we're voting for people that are going to serve us, but actually there's special interest groups and people that have way more time and power and money and have thought about all this and how to control the system. So the system of democracy that is kind of shown to people, this is what democracy is, not actually the system we live in. It's obviously very corrupt. And I think we kind of saw that in the last election with Hillary Clinton, some of the stuff that came out about her and obviously how corrupt she was in politics. And obviously career politicians tend to be more corrupted. But Trump's come in and there's been a real shift, and so a lot of things coming to the surface now. And it's not to say Trump isn't corrupt. He's obviously has his own background, but he's not a career politician. So I think he has much less to lose than some of these career politicians who have a lot of skeletons. And I think Jeffrey Epstein had probably a lot of skeletons in his closet, and he could have really done a lot of damage to the power structure. And so anyway, so when this came out that he got arrested, I kind of put a post out and said, oh, it's a matter of time before this guy gets killed. I'm surprised he hasn't been killed already. And obviously I wasn't the only person. There was probably hundreds or thousands of people kind of hypothesizing that he couldn't stay alive because he had too much truth. And then sure enough, the other day, the news came out, he committed suicide. And there was actually already an attempt on his life before, like a few weeks ago. And so, the people who were supposed to be protecting him or ensuring he doesn't kill himself, they're already aware he's a high value target. He's already tried to kill himself once, but somehow he ends up, unmonitored for several hours. Again, all the cameras go malfunction for a few hours. The typical kind of shit you hear when you find it hard to believe the official story. You realize there's a lot of holes there that doesn't add up. So anyway, so he's supposedly dead or not. We don't really know what happened. I don't really trust the official version of these kind of stories anyways, but it's not to get too deep into trying to uncover the truth in this particular case, because we don't have all the facts yet. It's still very early, but is more to kind of look at the theme of what's happening. Is every time you get like a whistleblower or someone with some knowledge, and they tend to disappear, right? So you had like Seth Rich with the DNC WikiLeaks, or this guy Khashoggi who knew a lot about the Middle East and some of the politics there, and he got disappeared in Turkey. And so I think the Panama Papers journalist, she also got blown up in a car bomb in Malta. Like Julian Assange, we all know what's happened, and Snowden, these kind of people. This is really what happens when people try to speak out and actually give you some truth. And what we think of as the media today, and their job was really to hold the government in check, and it's what people call like another pillar of government, and that was kind of their sort of original function. But if you look at how media is kind of being corrupted, is that they're pretty much just sort of talking heads, and they get their script and they kind of just go on camera and repeat it. And so you hear one story repeated 1,000 times, 2,000 times by different talking heads, and there's not really any independent journalism or questioning of the truth. So again, we saw that kind of with the response to this story when it came out that Jeffrey Epstein got suicided or whatever, and a lot of people didn't believe it, and there was conspiracy theories flying around. The media, the mainstream media like BBC and these kind of mainstream places, they came out with kind of like a debunking or rebuttal. It's a typical kind of response to say, oh, this is all the conspiracy theories out there, and obviously, it's all bullshit kind of thing. So they don't ever really want to know the truth or get to the bottom of it. And the people that tend to push too far, they end up in trouble, like I just said. So that's kind of the world we live in, where you really don't know what's going on, but you definitely know the media is kind of compromised, just like the politicians are. And so it's interesting that, in this case, we could have learned a lot about how the world really works, let's put it that way, but we may not ever know. It really depends what happens. I think now this is probably a kind of a watershed moment because this guy was so well known in the media, and even Trump is like retweeting the conspiracy theories, right? He's got like 63 million followers, and he's retweeting saying, "Oh, this is bullshit." Like he's retweeting people that are saying it wasn't a suicide or whatever. He was disappeared. So I think people are going to kind of look at this, and obviously people don't like pedophilia. It really hits close to home as like something that's very anti-family, anti the value systems we live in. And so yeah, people are obviously curious how it was possible this guy conveniently disappeared, and yeah, we'll see what the official investigation turns up, but I don't really have any hopes for getting to the truth of it through official venues. I think citizen journalism is something that's interesting. It's probably a movement that's taking off, and that's something we can touch on. But yeah, I'm curious to get your guys' view on how you reacted. Obviously, probably weren't surprised like me, but what your thoughts were, and kind of how it relates to the wider problem of the media, the media sort of management of the truth these days.
I mean, for me personally, like whenever I do my best to actively avoid all forms of MSM, mainstream media. I do my best. I'll kind of watch things via the financial markets, and they'll often mention things without bringing information. But I guess what this is a great example of, whether it's this guy getting picked off, or like say, a sudden resurgence in Ebola somewhere that was somehow forgotten about, is that I see them personally as being like a good indicator for how to kind of brace myself a little bit. I'm always preparing, not for the worst, but trying to protect myself, my assets. But I find these are good indicators to say, okay, something might be coming, or maybe the pace of something is going to become a lot faster that will be negative to my freedom, wealth, well-being. So as crazy as these things are, as horrible as it is, the positive to take from it is that it gives me a heads up that, okay, not that you necessarily need it, but like something big might be coming pretty soon that maybe wasn't obvious, or maybe if it is obvious, it might be coming a lot faster. So that's my kind of POV on this whole Epstein malarkey. It's just as something big, probably that's going to affect their financial well-being or something like that, is going to be coming in and try and use this to help get it passed. I mean, in England, it's probably Brexit. It's probably got nothing to do with Brexit, but it's definitely knocked Brexit up at the top of the headlines for a couple of days. So yeah, that's working, I guess, for the political elite.
So you think it's like a story to distract people, or you think there's going to be stories put out after this to kind of bury that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, they're gonna milk it like a Bill Cosby stuff, But where's Bill Cosby had nothing to do with the political elite? He had to do with a whole culture and ethnicity's identity and place in the world. Whereas Epstein, now you're talking about the political elite. And say what you want about Trump, it's just Trump making that tweet or retweeting things makes you kind of even made me question. Hang on a minute, maybe he's in control. Like it was just like something like, because I'm so used to assuming that they all kind of move in uniform in how they act, but he's just so surely that wasn't in the game plan, or they're trying to double bluff us, sort of thing. But it's so for me personally, I definitely think it's just. Yeah, it's to cover up something else that's going to be coming, which is probably not too original an idea, but I like to try and take the positives as best I can, so it doesn't completely drain my belief in everything. So, okay, this is why I am striving to be, I say, financially independent or location independent and stuff like that, or in good health where I don't have to rely on maybe state healthcare or something like that, because I hopefully reading the writing on the wall, as Michael Jackson said, the writing on the wall. And just taking steps to protect myself, hoping they don't happen. But if they do, then I've got half a chance at least.
It's interesting that it's happening. I think at the same time, the sort of financial markets are melting down, like gold and silver are blowing up. Seeing a lot of capital flight and problems in like Hong Kong and China. So I think, like everything is definitely connected. I don't know if this story is put out sort of timely to kind of distract people from what's going on, because it feels like there is something about takeoff financially, economically. But I don't know what other guys think. I don't know if you have any other thoughts before I chime in again.
I definitely think that could be right, that it's more or less a distraction, because if you've been following all the QAnon stuff for a long time, which is kind of what started it for me with the Pizzagate and all that stuff on 4chan that was happening, then you could see that QAnon was aware of the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing more than 2 years ago, I think, and started posting about that. Started even posting pictures of the island and flight logs from Clinton being there before all that stuff got censored. And when you then dive deeper into the QAnon, you figure out that there's clues and there's these patterns that you see that Trump is connected to QAnon. First, you think that it's someone that just likes Trump or from the military, but then afterwards they have these proofs that he's actually on board the Air Force One and the guy writing the posts and all that. So definitely Trump has been aware of the Epstein thing for more than a few years. So they could have planned it just to put it out there now to distract from the next election or whatever they're gonna use it for. So there's so many ideas about that, and there's a whole online revolution now that's into this QAnon stuff, and they all been pushed a special way into the pedophilia stuff and learning about all that, and then when it comes to the end, he just gets killed off, and maybe it just ends there, and then they've been spending 2 years just reading about a lot of stuff that doesn't come to an end because it ends probably with Epstein. If no one wants to investigate into it, they're never going to find all the other perpetrators, all the politicians and all the other Hollywood people who's been involved with all of that. There's a really big leak called Hollywood Insider, also on 4chan, where he says that there's basically no person who's highly up in Hollywood who has had any good roles in movies or won any Oscars, which is not a pedophile or has done something really, really bad. One or two leaks about that, one called Hollywood Insider and another one called Hollywood 2 or something. They all say the same stuff, and they come with really, really big proofs about stuff going on. So Hollywood is deeply connected into that, the media, the politics, everything. So I don't know where it ends. It's just, yeah, it's hard to say.
And like you said, there's a lot of rabbit holes, so I think it can be quite disempowering if you spend a lot of time going into this stuff, and then at the end of the day, the movement you were following is just kind of like just to sidetrack you somewhere, and all that energy is diverted into something that is ultimately kind of meaningless or pointless.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably my biggest takeaway, is not to get too wrapped up in this, or like, you know, we got to get to the bottom of this, but like just to be aware there's a lot of sort of dark shit going on, and not let that kind of guide your thinking and influence either. Like if you just accept the media's point of view, or you think the politicians aren't super corrupt or whatever, you think the system is working, like it's broken in many, many ways. And I think it's just another kind of indicator of how badly it's broken, that, you know, the guy who could have fingered a lot of people basically just disappeared and never knew it was going to happen, and it still happened. I mean, that's as kind of obvious as it gets. So it just makes me a lot more skeptical than I already was, which it actually doesn't surprise me at all, but it obviously just kind of confirms that part that, you know, I thought, yeah, it's just too convenient. He's not going to be around for long. But yeah, I'm curious, Moritz and Rupert, what you guys think.
Yeah, I think of it a lot in terms of a sort of superstructure of political control that has grown historically, that always grows in places where overt power is something we despise. Like you can have sort of two ways of having a system of political control, where either you have explicit power and implicit like management of it or something like that, or like either
sort of
the
like
power,
each Japanese country's a military rule, you know, it's very explicit control is what you
right
mean.
Exactly. Like where power is visible and absolute, or where it's concealed, right? And so actually sometimes we don't think about that way, but actually things can be more fucked up and more horrible when political power is not visible or is concealed, because then you can't point at it. You can't actually like even name the evil. Like there's no the logic or the principle by which things seem to be working is not identifiable, and so that is a huge problem, because then you yourself can't think about the world or the arena that you're living and working within in any coherent way, because it doesn't seem to make sense. Like if at least in a regime where political power is very clearly tied to like military power, for example, then like, oh, okay, these are the guys with the guns. They have these rules, and if I follow these rules, I'll be fine. But if if the political power is not visible, and then suddenly you find yourself at a cool party in Hollywood, like after you've like just made your first album succeed, and like you get some drugs, like because that's what you're accustomed to, because you like to have fun, and then suddenly there are photos of you like having in your arms somebody who looked like 25 but actually was 17, and now you're like part of the problem, and you can't escape, and you draw other people in as well, like like this sort of it's a really hard question. And so for me the question always comes back to, or there are multiple questions that can come from that, but one of them is there a way to marry explicit power with explicit authority, or like with it being visible, which would probably be preferable. Like there's some arguments to be made for actually returning from this pretension of democracy and pretension of freedom and pretension of having all these like beautiful rights that we think we have, to having them actually, but giving up our pretense of having a say in the political process. Like there's some people who think like in order to actually preserve rights and liberalism, or as in like the idea of having rights and the idea of having freedom, we actually need to jettison democracy in the way we currently think of it as a representative democracy, and instead return to like local participatory democracy to some sense, where like you actually have a say in your local polity, in your local system, but then the larger context, like you leave up to like a monarch or like some other like actual like dictators. Like at least they're going to have a stable system there, and that is not going to like suddenly, like that's not going to like slowly stranglehold everything, because they actually have an incentive, because they themselves benefit from the success of the country, to provide a system that allows people to at least do business normally, rather than have, and for normal people to create new business and like have economic freedom, rather than having every single attempt to create something new be immediately integrated into this existing superstructure that is absorbing, like the Borg absorbing everything that's new, everything, every personal, every expression of individuality. Anyway, that's one question. The other thing is, it's sort of fun sometimes watching these political dramas, especially if you've been aware of the problems.
You've been red-pilled before.
Yeah, exactly. And then like it can also in me sometimes lead to, oh fuck, like why do I have to, like I hate to be right. Right, and that people have such a hard time seeing those things, and that like even when it's so blatantly obvious that things are wrong, like they still don't go in the direction of like, okay, now we actually have to change things. But
democracy is like a blanket though, isn't it? It's like this thing that
security blanket.
Exactly, yeah. And people love to use it as an excuse to have an opinion that they have 20% of a quality opinion, but they'll kind of apply it to the greater democracy. Democracy is a free way out for people to say someone else deal with it a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Where you have this because you say and you believe that your voice matters in some way, like for everything, like oh, like my vote matters and my voice matters because it's democracy and they're like the voice of people matters, which is not actually demonstrably true, but it's the social narrative we have to all agree to continue to like support the system.
It's much easier to have that identity because it comes under the groupthink mentality.
Right.
Because then you don't have to really go into yourself and dig down any kind of layers to get to the truth.
Right,
because
like and
if we all did that, we'd come up with a totally different reality. But it's so difficult for everyone to do that.
Right, but not only that, but also like I've been recently experiencing and really thinking deeply about the relationship between speaking something into like a smaller group rather than a larger group, and not speaking publicly, not public speech. Like, I think that words, especially in this hyper-saturated environment of media, are simultaneously cheaper than ever, and yet more serious than ever to some degree. Like, and so for me, I see a lot of people lose like any kind of agency they have by speaking publicly and letting it sort of dissipate into this void, rather than speaking to the people who they have trust relationships with, and then based on those trust relationships and in a very small circle having conversation, building shared coherence where you have a shared map to some degree. You understand each other's language, you can understand each other's models, and you can sort of move more conceptual space with less effort, in a sense, like with a bigger lever, if you think about it, like which you can build up when you have conversations with each other for a long time. You know what the other person's worldviews and realities are that they live in. And then based on that, you can actually do things together rather than only talk about them. So with a lot of people that I have similar relationships to as I do with you guys, some like who I have been longtime friends, I have like very small chats, like 3 people or 4 people. And then that particular chat has a very specific purpose. Like this one is, for example, ostensibly about self-empowerment, but then there's another one that I have is like about exploring the value of visual language, for example. Another one is like this thing that I've done with 2 of my friends where we organize these retreats. And so giving specific purposes to specific small group channels that then allow me to speak, not publicly, not to everybody, but into a very specific social group where we all have a shared purpose in coming together there. And then based on that, momentum forms and energy builds, and you start to be able to do things together rather than only like say something into the void. It dissipates, and you have this feeling that whatever you've done like has had no effect, right? So the like when I have this feeling of saying something and it has no effect, then I have this relationship with language where it's just another way to release. Yeah, so that's just another way to release pressure, rather than another way to like enact my will in the world and build my own agency.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting takes. I think if you look how like forums like Reddit and other places where this stuff gets discussed, you'll see there's a lot of like I don't know what the best word is, like bot armies or like people that come online to try and shape the influence. So again, if it's just you putting your opinion or your idea out there, it can get shut down very easily. And a lot of public discourse can get kind of easily manipulated or censored or whatever. You see it all the time, right? Like Twitter, like I said, the hashtags were kind of being suppressed, and so you couldn't see what people were actually thinking. And I think 4chan is one of the few places where it still happens. Like you still get some sort of discussion censored, but there tends to be a lot more independent thought that's not so mainstream in that sense. And so you get some interesting ideas come out of that, and it's harder to kind of control the discussion. You still see a lot of like trolls and bot armies on there, but it's just a very noisy place in general. So it's not necessarily the best place to spend a lot of time. But yeah, the idea of like getting a small group of people or putting an idea out with like in your social circle, like a smaller network where it's more impactful, maybe that feels like it's more empowering that way. So that's kind of what I do, why I share a lot on Facebook and not really outside of Facebook. With everything I share, like health and economics, because I feel like it's going to reach the people I care about, and people that are interested can kind of reach out to me, and it's like a very personal kind of discussion. Right. So it feels like it's worth my time to do that.
And where you also, or where I also have an assurance and a knowledge that the people who are interacting with what I'm saying have a fundamentally aren't trolls and maybe even have a fundamentally sound process of engaging with reality. So I actually don't have to check and validate and assess every single piece of information myself, but we distribute the work of understanding the world between each other based on trust. And so then when I get some news item that I don't know how to think about, and I know there's this dude like who knows a lot about like this particular area of politics, for example, then instead of me trying to make sense of the story, I send it to him, and then he tells me what he thinks about. Yeah, exactly. And then I can spread that because I trust him, and I think I've seen his epistemological process working. I can then share that to everybody else who asks about that. And so you build a sort of underground information network that isn't taking place in the public channels, but uses the public channels as like simply publication points where you put out the conclusions you reach, as well as just information feeders into your sort of process of making sense of the world.
I think that's a very lucky place to be, because Facebook invariably, and myself included, doesn't typically get used for that anymore. And I think it's like if you're at all nervous about putting out a post on Facebook, like most people are, which is a truth, because you're going to get judged and you haven't put the typical groupthink political angle on it, then if you're in that position where you feel like you can do that, then that's a fantastic thing, because initially what we all end up using Facebook for is to gain positive feedback loops rather than share something openly. So I think if you can do that, it's a real positive.
I think everybody can do it. It's not that difficult, but it takes a little bit of effort, and it takes rejecting on an embodied level, not just on the intellectual level, the goal and the intention of trying to persuade anybody outside, like anybody. Like the goal for me is not to persuade people when I post something, but the goal for me is to like send something out into the void, like of the people who I already know kind of who they are, and then to see, is their view of this thing similar to mine, or like where are the differences, so that I can integrate more of reality into my picture. And it just takes a understanding of how Facebook works, basically, or any tool, and then to make it work according to your principles. For example, like on Facebook, there's friends lists. You can post things to a particular friends list where only those people see that, right? Or you just do it in the messenger chat. It's actually even better because there you just have the constant chat between each other, rather than like these posts that are sort of out there. So I don't know, like it seems so difficult, but it's actually quite easy once you get the hang of it, or once you have somebody who knows how to do it, and then they can help you do it.
I mean, you seem like you know what you're doing with it, mate. I probably need to take a leaf out of your book, but certainly, you know, posts come up all the time for people where you end up inquisitive, and then you feel like you potentially can't share for fear of being judged by some friends of a previous era that you don't really care about anyway, but you still perhaps might not share it. Right,
but I mean, again, like, I don't care to persuade anybody. So, and when I stop trying to care whether I persuade anybody, I can enter into a deep relationship with the people who I do already know to some degree, and then they themselves, based on the value that I produce with the information I put out, they themselves are the pathway of sharing it to even more other good people, right? And that's ultimately what I want. I don't want a quantity of faceless masses that I don't know at all, but rather I want deeper relationships with people who have agency and who I can deepen the relationship with, so that we can build collective agency, so that we can support each other and help each other and defend each other and all these kind of things, rather than, oh, like I have a lot of followers. What does that even mean?
It's really interesting take on it. Like if you just went through your Facebook friends list and you just like created two categories, like let's say blue pill and red pill, and so you only post stuff that's controversial to your red pill list, and you just don't even raise attention or awareness to anyone who's on blue pill because they're just not ready for it anyways. It's just going to create noise.
That's such a good idea.
I think I'm going to go do that now.
Well, I also regularly go through my friend list and cull, like just unfriend a lot of people who I don't feel like I know who they are or what kind of person they are, and just like get away, and then now I have again like 2,000 people, friends, right? Like who like I have some semblance of how I know them.
Yeah, definitely good to cull. And again, I don't really care if people like follow me for health and stuff. I don't really know them personally. I'm just going to spam them or whatever I want to say. But if you're worried about people's reactions that maybe you do know personally, or you don't want to feel judged or whatever, you can just do that blue pill, red pill thing on people that you do know.
Remind me which one was which. Which one's blue and which one's red? Red's the one that...
Red's the truth, or what your version of the truth. And then blue is like the mainstream matrix truth.
I think I'm going to call it that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've done it for so long that most people have just unfollowed me or whatever if they don't like what I'm saying. So it's probably don't need to do it now. But it's good. It's a good exercise if it stops you from posting what you would like to share. Or
I mean, what you've just said, Maurice, is a really good example, because it's exactly what I said to you a couple of weeks ago, Michael, about me enjoy. I said to you, keep up the Facebook post, didn't I? Because I found it valuable.
What are you guys doing in real life when you meet new people? For example, we're moving to Portugal now. We want to meet some cool people. We find some areas where we know there's this alternative people who we resonate with. So we just start talking like we would with you guys about red pill stuff, and then see who falls in love and not be involved with them, or how would you do it in real life? Like
you just say, what's the biggest red pill you've had thrown on you in the last year? And if they say, what's the red pill? Then they go on the blue pill list.
No, it's actually really interesting, because I heard a talk a few years ago. Someone said, always tell your truth. Always tell people the truth. Don't hide anything. Always be the best version of yourself. Be the true version of yourself. Because if you're not the true version of yourself, you'll start attracting people who don't resonate with the true version of yourself. And if you are the true version of yourself, everyone who doesn't like that version will fall off. And you stick with the ones
for sure.
Like you.
For sure. But I think there's a difference between being your true self and being obnoxiously obsessed with one particular feature of reality that you need to now everybody have acknowledged, right? Like, there's Epstein. Like, did you know about Epstein? Like everybody, like that's the only thing you can talk about. Like, then you're, I think, obsessed with like, you haven't found a way to have it be sufficient that you know about it, rather than having everybody know about it as well, right? Like unless these
they got to validate your truth for you. Yeah, that's
exactly. So for me, like I don't care to persuade anybody, because that's not the value that I get out of having a relationship with somebody. The value I get out of a relationship with somebody is having somebody who I've been able to connect with on a deep enough level. And some people aren't able to do that with me, and I'm not with them, because they are married to some like deep delusion that they are too afraid to examine themselves, because they've committed too much of their life to it. And they don't want to like change now. So then we can't go that place, and then I probably will naturally gravitate away from them. But other than that, I tend to actually prize the relationship over a particular thing I need them to know, or like we need to agree on, unless they're like, it's something horrible that they like don't agree with me on. So I don't know, like it's,
unless they love pedophilia or something.
Yeah.
What would it be as an example? Like when you meet someone new and you start talking, like how would you kind of direct the conversation into knowing if someone resonates with your?
I don't know about you guys, but I really try and be a big listener first of all, like before I go anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely one of the strategies I pursue. It's sort of like, you know how we talked about NPCs and mind viruses and all that kind of stuff. It's like I'm basically like running. I'm like, computers talk to each other by pinging each other, right? So like they send a ping to get a response, and like then the connection gets established, and then they can have a bidirectional communication channel. So what I do is I ping people, I query people, and like sort of ask questions, or just listen for what they're saying, and then either point at inconsistencies in a friendly way, or like simply continue to listen and inquire into like the deeper parts of their world and their personality and all that kind of things. And ultimately, by listening and having a sort of slight direction of going deeper in what they care about, I demonstrate that I'm interested in who they are and what they have to say and all those kind of things. And I sort of, I let them run out their script. Like if they're an NPC or whatever, like I let them run out their script, whatever ideological possession they have. And then once they run out their script, once they sort of come up empty, I don't know what to say anymore. That's when finally, okay, you can actually have a conversation now, because then they've gotten rid of all the obsession, the tension, the stuff that just comes out like vomit, rather than a natural flow-like expression of what they currently think in the moment, with their actual reasoning faculties in play, rather than the stuff they've been conditioned to express. So an actual conversation can start to take place when
it takes a lot of patience, though.
Yeah. Of course, I don't have the patience every time to do that, but when I am with people who I get the sense, and I've gotten pretty good at sensing it, whether these people are basically capable of listening and of having some kind of bi-directional communication happen, then I sometimes will judge it to be valuable to just do that. But most of the time, I'm just interested, okay, what is this person trying to do? Is it something I can agree with? Then I'll just help them figure out how to do that better. And then over time, the relationship will deepen, and that will buy me extra sort of personal relationship capital with them, which then, based on me helping them, they will be super open to be based on the basic need of people to have reciprocity between each other, to listen to what I have to say, or to help me do something else that I need to do. So
I think two red flags for me, or not necessarily red flags, but I know the conversation is going to be limited, are when they start talking about their commute. I immediately realize that, my commute's only 2 hours, but it's not that bad. I'm like, cool, right? That's probably going to be the end of this one pretty soon.
I had a phase.
What's the other one?
The other one is when they use their job as their identity. So they're like, who are you? And what they really mean is, what do you do? And as soon as you have your job as your identity, you kind of potentially sacrifice everything else. It's not like, what have you been up to, or what are you up to? It's, who are you? Let me try and put you in a box so I can figure out how to relate to you, because I'm in this box as well. So I'll never ask someone, what do you do? But it's the easiest question for anyone in a in a conventional UK or general world.
Rupert, you find, because I've found this as well, right? When someone asks you what you do and you intentionally don't ask it back, you see them squirm and they find a way to bring it up. That makes sense? You ever yeah? Okay. But one thing I was doing for a while, when like flat earth was a thing for a while, So whenever I was at gatherings, I'd have an opening question, and I seem to be able to get away with a lot of shit. People think I'm joking all the time, but I'd use it as a way to cull, like, not like I'm, you know, better, but whether or not it's this person, I have anything to give to this person anything to give to me. So I'd say, hey, like, how you doing? Do you believe in a flat Earth? And just wait.
That's a great one, mate. That's a really good one.
And the reaction was often a giggle, which is when someone laughs, that's like, okay, that's good already. Like they understand nuance, great, all right. And then I only had it happened to me once, where a person started going into it and all their reasoning. I was like, okay. I mean, it's cool. I'd never heard that reasoning before. I didn't know 2 + 2 could equal 45, but I do now. And I thought, okay, cool. And it's kind of like ended the conversation. But
so do you ask them, do you believe in flat Earth, or do you say, cool, I can't believe we found out the Earth's flat? What do you do?
I do great. I don't know. I'm very fortunate. I have a way where I seem to be able to ask all questions, and I still have friends around me somehow. So someone was introduced to a house party. It's usually when I do it, or someone say, hey, this is this person. I'm like, hey, how you doing? You know, because they try and introduce you to have a conversation so the host can go off somewhere else and do something else. So they don't really want to talk to that person or to you. And so I go, hey, how you doing? Do you believe in a flat Earth?
People are just not used to that. You know, the moment I have those conversations, or have a conversation where I know it's going to be linear and I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about job and then commute and then something else, I'm like, see you later. Like,
I'm like, here's my buddy Lynn. How much with him?
Had to use the restroom.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's a nice little opener, because usually 9 out of 10. I mean, there's even on the flip side of it. If someone says no, it's not, their reasoning could be just as shit still. I don't know why the Earth is not flat or whatever. It's like, okay, well, that's still an indicator for me as well. But I kind of find myself, you know, with saying things about, you're not meant to be friends with people forever, because it's like one thing I've been saying to myself a lot lately, and it's kind of like what Rupert was saying regarding, and what Morris saying with the list. Like when you have people on socials, it's a way to potentially start something. Like if you've met up, okay, we had a great interaction at first. Let's potentially keep going to see where it goes. They may be shy, you may be shy. It may just not be. Maybe you're only meant to know that person in that one instance in your life, and that's all it was meant to be. Not to be too romantic about it, but I think it's nice to acknowledge, and it's like being in a position of power, almost to say, you know, it's okay to not be friends with this person, to have a relationship with people forever. I've got a buddy.
And also, you can have different types of friends. Like I have girlfriends who are boring as fuck, but you know, I have a great time playing golf with them.
I've got friends.
The reason why I come to you guys is, or you know, I enjoy interacting with you guys is because I know it's uncertain, right? I know it's uncertain.
Actually, that's a good point when you put it like that, because I'm trying to think of some people like I say red pill, blue pill. You guys talking? I'm thinking like I've just kind of mass bombarded, but there's people that I know who are like I can have that conversation with, but that's all I kind of want to talk to them about. If that makes sense. And there's other people who I'll happily talk to about stuff which would be seen as shit, which for me, for some reason, I have an interest in or whatever it is. But like I said, it compartmentalize the different groups of friends. And it's kind of learning that I don't have to be just one way, because we're not just one way, I guess. And that's kind of come a bit off of Epstein, but it's interesting to think that how things change as you get older. I mean, I'm not opposed to having new friends. Obviously, I met you guys. I'd like to think you're friends, but it's interesting to see how you kind of naturally cull people away, and you realise, you know, you're only friends with them because of the situation. You went to school together, and you're just in a room together as a forced camaraderie for survival purposes, you know, so you wouldn't become maybe a victim of bullying, or, you know, wouldn't be seen as uncool and stuff like that. But I mean, of you guys, how many of you kind of still actively communicate with friends? I obviously might be and go to state school, so it doesn't really count apart from at the end. But for the rest of you guys, like, did you friends that you made at school and stuff up until that age 16 or 18 before you left? How many people you acted? Yeah. Okay. And how many of them are still on your friends list on Facebook? Yeah. That's the It's an interesting one. I'm the same. I probably stick to none. I might have a random. One of them is my barber, so I talk to him. But apart from that, it's just I don't really. but there's something that makes me. I don't know what it's, but I feel like I'd be losing something still.
Here's one for you.
Got rid of them, yeah.
Siblings, right? It's very hard. I don't know. You guys have brothers and sisters, all of you?
Yep.
Do they all adopt a similar, not extreme red pill, but not necessarily where are they on the spectrum? Are they open-minded and keen to learn about all the variety in the world, or are they trying to just fit in this path that's already been predetermined for them because it's easiest to do with identity and everything else? Where are they roughly?
I would say it's funny, like the 6 of us, the 3 that went to school later in life after sort of growing up more independently, we all kind of think quite differently, and the youngest 3, they're like all blue pill, like pretty religiously, except the youngest, who probably spends a lot of time on 4chan. So it's also interesting how that happens.
What about you, Mel?
Yeah, I have a younger brother. He's just like me. He's going for the free life. He wants to get out of society and live free, work with people and live off the land and all this stuff. But it's been quite new for him as well. So we kind of taken the journey together since our trip to Peru, where we had some really strong ceremonies going on. So that was very interesting.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, but I only have one brother, but he's on board with us.
Moritz, what about you?
Well, I have 3 younger brothers. I don't know how many of them see any or many of my posts, so I don't really have an active conversation with them about these kind of topics. But I'm also not that often home when we would have lots of those involved conversations. But I think principally they're open to any kind of information based simply on the relationship that they have with me. The next younger one after me, I'm the oldest. He does have an inquiring mind and is very interested in understanding how the world works and how it's corrupt and all those kind of things. And so he's doing his own reading, mostly still in the German language world, which to me is just like, who cares? Like, it's like German language is like, there's not enough extreme thinking going on there that I would confine my perceptions to. So I think it's absolutely indispensable to be actively searching out English language sources, because that's at least where most of the crazy global stuff is happening. But other than that, I know the younger 2, I'm sure that they will be open to having conversations, but they are less world inquiring and more doing their thing to some degree. But I don't think it's because they would dislike it or are completely blue pill or something like that. But yeah, I think it's also not necessary to make the idea of red pill or understanding everything about how the world is fucked up and etc. A necessary feature of somebody's reality. I think you can still be a good person and just do the thing you're doing, but just have no pretensions about knowing how the world works.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a good distinction. I think a lot of people don't have the space and time to really think about this stuff a lot, and they can still be perfectly okay people. But it's the type of people that think they have the world figured out, and they want to tell you their worldview, and it's completely a blue pill version. That's what I mean by blue pill. Yeah.
Well, Rupert, he's kept quiet about his siblings. I know you're military boys, aren't you? Or
no, just me. But I'd say, maybe the 2 lists should be very blue pill and everyone else.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
I think
play about have it, test it, see how you find it.
The guys in the middle deserve a bit of deserve a bit of prodding, a bit of gentle prodding. But my siblings were pretty traditional. So for example, you can't really unfriend your family on Facebook. So I think creating that blue pill, red pill list kind of will lead to it's all about peace and acceptance, right? I don't need to challenge a lot of those relationships.
Sure.
And when I might put something out that's not antagonistic, but perhaps different, your friends is one thing, you can ditch them, but I think your family,
especially if you want a shot at inheritance as well. You still want to get your money. You don't want to be risking that shit, do you? I mean,
yeah, mate. Yeah.
That's quite like that.
It was one of the point that Moritz made about like the explicit power thing, which is interesting. I think if you look at like centralization of democracy and globalization as a sort of centralization trend, is that nobody's voice is really represented. So you have to convince everyone to buy in by voting and stuff, and get them to believe that the system's working in their interests. And just getting rid of that completely, or having a more explicit form of power that you can see, it's like you remove that illusion of like democracy. I think that's kind of what happened with Epstein, is that when you can centralize power so easily, is you only need to have a few people in top positions that you can blackmail, and you essentially control huge amounts of decision making and power structure, and that's kind of where democracy is. And obviously the election, just like, well, we get to pick which blackmailed or puppet or talking head we want to, basically interface between the elite power and us for 3 years, but they're not actually going to do what we want them to do. They're already bought and paid for by special interests, by whatever, lobby groups and stuff. And so I think that's kind of what's happened with democracy, is like we're just scratching the surface. People like Epstein, is not to say he's the only one out there. There's probably tons and tons of like pedo rings and trafficking rings and blackmailing groups and tied to various intelligence agencies. Like there's probably all that going on, and we never get to hear about any of it because the media is completely, like I said, they're on lockdown. They're not serving a check on government anymore, but they're just kind of just in the same bed as all the other guys. So we really can't rely on them to tell us, oh, your democracy is being subverted. You really have to make conversations with people who at least can acknowledge the possibility that these things are going on, and what is the implication for you and your life. Like, I mean, I've never voted because I thought it was completely futile. I thought these people are going to have my interest anyways. I'm just endorsing this system if I keep voting, because I'm giving it my buy-in, I'm giving it my belief. And if everyone stopped doing that, then quickly everyone would turn away from government, and they would lose a lot of that sort of energy or endorsement. And I think that's really what's to happen. Is I think Trump is maybe the last shot people are giving to this system to like put someone in who's not totally corrupt from the beginning in terms of politics. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to see a real sort of fracturing or decentralization of power structures. And I think that
we've got one more layer of
seeing that already.
I think we've got one more layer of populism extremity to come in the next couple of rounds of US elections, actually. People are talking about Oprah, or have you guys seen that guy? Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think about it.
Everyone wants a free car, basically. Yeah.
Kind of makes sense if you think about it. There's one guy, I watched the Joe Rogan recently with, that guy, Dan Bilzerian?
Oh.
Dan Bilzerian, yeah.
Oh, Bilzerian. Oh, that's an old school interview, that one. Nice, okay.
That's a couple of years ago. And then I've even listened to some of his more recent stuff. And he's talking about becoming, running for president now. And you can kind of just see the populism narrative playing out, because as the system gets more and more broken, we need a more and more extreme fix.
Well, the thing with Bilzerian, I mean, I have no idea about his political stance, but he'd probably be far more libertarian than probably the rest of them, or capitalist leaning than the rest of them, just because of his background. Again, I'm just assuming. I guess the way he's probably doing it for publicity to make money. There's him, a bunch of girls around him, a couple of tanks and AKs, and he's like, vote for me, and all of the South will vote for him, But I don't know.
The political parties will have to get more and more extreme to gain any traction. Hence, why the Democrats have got zero opportunity in the next election as it stands. And it's only extreme ideas that will be able to affect any kind of political change.
It's weird how it's just so polarized. I mean, it's not just there; it's in the UK as well. It's just they're a lot gentler with how they display it over here. But in the US, it's like...
Well, look at Bojo. I mean, it's an obvious choice if you think about it now.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's interesting to see how the idea of anyone being a centrist, you could probably assume they'd be spat on, as if, if you're a traitor or some rubbish, not just someone that's trying to actively... I mean, just on their political system, to get anything through, you need to be able to actively engage and... all those things with both sides of the equation. I mean, how it even became to just be 2 or 3 party system as a norm around most of the world is very, very interesting how it even became a thing. The only one that a massive Western country that is like that, I think, like Germany, though obviously there's their issues there as well, but they've had like minority governments or like more fragmented for a longer time. It's interesting how most Western seems like 2 parties. There's 2 parties, and it's sometimes a third. It's just 2. It's just, I don't even know how it came to be, and like you have to be part of one camp or the other. And how people are so willing to just be put into. But when you talk to most people, they're not even that way inclined. They're like, "Oh, it's better than the other lot," sort of thing. You know, it's a weird one. Like, whereas if we just were to just not vote, assuming you even believe your votes are counted in the first place. Yeah, definitely have an impact. I can see that. Maybe.
Under what circumstances would you vote, Michael?
Oprah.
Assuming you were back in the UK.
Looks like he's frozen.
Yeah.
Expensive.
Deep thought.
Me too.
Well, until he comes back, I can say something like I have voted, but I have had no pretensions about what that means. Like, it means nothing, but it is still something I can have fun with doing. Anyway, go on, Michael.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Here.
Seems he has problems.
Yeah, you're lagging a little bit, Michael.
Let's get back in the sunlight. Who's that lovely music on?
That's brilliant. Yeah, I like that.
Is that
how's that now? Is that better?
And I have. Yeah, that knows better.
Yeah, I was going to say that I would probably vote like local elections, if in that sense, if I lived in a place where I felt I was going to stay long term, especially, and that that councillor or that guy had some sort of authority to redistribute resources that's actually going to affect me. But at a general election level, like it's probably like the lesser of 2 evils at this point. If you do vote, like if I was in the US and I was having to vote between Trump and Clinton, like, knowing what I know about Clinton, I would probably feel she's going to be a much bigger danger for the rest of the world. So in that sense, maybe I would vote. But yeah, like Marit said, not any illusion what that means. It's not like you endorsing Trump or anything. It's just you're trying to minimize damage to the rest of the world. So yeah, that's probably the only situation I would vote. I think we probably need to move beyond democracy to some sort of decentralized model of accountability and power sharing. And I have no idea
how extreme does politics need to be before people figure out that it's broken and we need to go to that decentralized model?
I think it's going to go a bit further towards populism, like you said, and probably governments have to go bankrupt, and then the power of governments shrinks naturally because they have less resources. And that's where you have sort of power vacuum and potentially failed states where other power structures emerge. So that's an interesting topic. I don't know if you want to go into it now, but I think that's kind of where things are headed for a lot of countries.
It's a lot of it's like the boy and frog, because if the assumption is from the people that make these changes, it's been such a, not slow and steady, but it's been a continual heating up of the cauldron where it's just, people can, they will tolerate it because they've got used to it. And they can think, oh, okay, I'm still alive, I'm still kicking, I can take a bit more, So, like I said, the extent's going to have to go before anything changes. I mean, it depends what happens. I mean, I know in the UK, there's still constant talk about decentralisation of powers from Westminster for, I forget the actual phrase, but for Wales and Scotland, Northern Ireland, where they can have their own devolution makes it. They can have their own power on par with Westminster, or at least maybe one tier below. So that might be a thing that may help to stem that in, let's say, in the UK, or maybe. And if it works, obviously I know they've been trying it, like the Catalonians, for a while in Spain, but obviously their whole constitution is written up so that people don't have a say. That's how it's structured. So it's, but on the big world front, like the big countries that actually matter when it comes to, I guess, like weaponry and strength and currency strength via the weapons, either US, Russia, or Russia's just inconsistent, but US and, let's say, China. I know the assumption is that, and it's all compared to what it used to be, China's far more free market than it was in recent years. Obviously, go back much longer, it was a lot better than it is now. But and whereas with the US is the fear that the Bolsheviks are going to take over, and that they're going to do what they're going to do, or try and do what they're going to do. But it seems that the benefit, like you guys saying lesser of two evils with Trump, is almost think people, they assume he's going to get back in because the lefties are all busy just beating each other up, or it's not that unified message. Very few of them have policies, or if they do have policies, I'm looking at Andrew Yang policy, which just scares the hell out of people. Like, what do you mean give everyone $2,000, $1,000 a month sort of thing, you know? And like it's just like it's fine. So yeah, I think because they're not really answering the question or trying to actively solve or address the issues for the mass voting and people who voted for Trump, right? I mean, not to make it a political conversation, but yeah, he's going to be around for a lot longer. And when he's endorsed for another 4 years, oh, okay, so yeah, it wasn't just a fluke. It really is that, you know, maybe that would then trigger. I doubt he might. I mean, I see what Rupert says. I think for him, I think for the US, Trump may be as extreme as it goes for populism, because I mean, again, can't tell the future, but I can't really be seeing anyone. I'm not really been seeing people who were his followers. You see people like the lefties who are saying, "Oh, he's this, he's that," but you don't seem to hear much. I'm sure mainstream media would want to boost this if this was a fact, of people saying, "Oh, he's failed us." He's, you know, once maybe you start hearing that, maybe it may get a bit more extreme, but I don't know if we're even going to probably hear that. So maybe that may be as bad as it gets for the US on that side of things. But issues, they may go super socialist on the flip side, when they and that obviously is a whole thing in itself. Yeah.
I think it's just cycles as far as this goes. It's a bit off topic, but like I would vote for a government or a politician that admits they need to shrink to bring prosperity back to, you know, the world, because ultimately with economics, you can't have a massive government spending half the economy and expect to have a prosperous, you know, future. It just doesn't work like that. So no politician like Andrew Yang wants to hand out $1,000 a month, but he doesn't want to admit that the government has to shrink by like 80% for that to be feasible.
Sure.
So you're not just taxing a shrinking private sector. Like, no one looks at the numbers, and no government wants to give back power. They just want more and more control. So you always get to a point where they grow to the point where they break, and then it fractures, right? And that's what you see with the Roman Empire. That's what you see with like peak empires, all these you know, times of history, and it's just a cycle. So I don't think we've reached that breaking point yet, because US hasn't yet broken, right? They still have food on the table. They still have largely, you know, military domination. So I think the world is fracturing a little bit in terms of US is no longer the dominant power, and that will make things interesting for a sort of third parties or third players to run alternative systems of, you know, potentially money, whatever, you know, in terms of power. I might go endorse those countries if I consider them to be more free than my own country. Like if UK is devolving into socialism or more control, more surveillance, whatever, then I'm not going to stay in that country and vote in that country. I'm going to look for a system, government where they don't have to press their people so hard because they run their country a bit smarter. So I think those type of systems are emerging. Like, I've lived in Singapore off and on for the last 10 years. They're like, kind of said, they're much more explicit power. You know what the rules are, you know what to do, and you know, I don't think it's too oppressive or against people, right? They want to attract entrepreneurs, they want to attract smart people. They you know, they have policies in place so you're not getting taxed more than you're offering. So in terms of value, you know, they're able to attract a lot of people, and I think I'm not the only person that moved to Singapore 10 years ago when they saw, you know, UK and Europe and the banks starting to collapse. So I think the world's going to keep changing, and obviously there'll be opportunities everywhere. But the larger systems that are sort of the legacy players, they're obviously losing control. And I think they're going to sort of devolve or descend into more and more sort of populism as they look to blame someone for their problems, instead of admitting, oh, we just cannot run this system of massive government and massive debt, and it's not going to work to just hand out more and more money. And again, it's just a basic lack of education. Like, no one's taught people about governments and cycles and empire. These things don't exist in the history books because, you know, there's very good reasons. So unless you really start to question reality, you get to the bottom of this, you start to realize, oh, okay, this is what's happening. You kind of accept it to some degree. You can't stop that trend, but you can definitely look for opportunities because the world is a big place. So that's kind of a big picture outlook in terms of how I'd vote or how I'd look to get residency in a country where there is more opportunity in the future, as I see it.
The way I look at it is that I don't know super much about politics, but I've looked enough to see that the system is broken, and most of the people are corrupt in one way, either through the system because that's the way it's made, that you have to be corrupt, or just because they're corrupt in nature. But the only solution I see for myself is building small self-sustainable systems for myself and my family, growing own food, having sun, having water, having rest, peace, nature, all these things, the basics, basically boiling it down to the pure basics. When you have that, then you can always add something. And the more self-sustainable you are, the less you'll be reliant on government. We actually don't need government for anything, because people are most people are really peaceful, and we don't need policing, we don't need all these things. So the only thing I see is that we start building these small systems ourselves, and then government will automatically shrink, because there will be enough of these small communities around that people, they don't want to be part of something where they have to work 40 hours a week when they can just grow their own food and live off the land, which we used to do 100 years ago, all of us. So it's kind of like, yeah, running a little bit from society, but also building something more sustainable for ourselves and the future, but keeping it very simple, because we can actually live very simply when you go back to the basics. So that's one way to do it.
That lifestyle sounds dreamy, mate. Genuinely.
It's doable. It's doable. Like, yeah, if you can find a place like Portugal, I think, like we were talking off camera earlier, the opportunities in a place where it's still quite connected and easy to live, but they just have slightly, more relaxed conditions of life, and people are happier, and yeah, you got better weather, health is easier, growing crops is easier. Those kind of things that is harder in a lot of cold countries, and especially in cities and things where there's just not the conditions for that sort of independence, as you're more tied into the matrix for your day-to-day life, and then it's hard to kind of unplug or choose your level of participation in that sense.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, guys. I don't know anyone got anything else to say on this topic, but it's we've had quite a good discussion. It's gone all over the place. Anyone else? Anything else?
The moral of the story is buy Bitcoin, I think, isn't it? Really? You think.
More or less what so yeah. The flip side, like when I was collapsing confidence, then there's also, yeah, we've talked about crypto before, but I think that's definitely a way to gain some independence in terms of long-term having control. I vote with my dollars or with my, with my money, whatever that's in. So yeah, that's
and your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. What you pay attention to. And that's why going down all these rabbit holes is not necessarily the best use of your time. Once you reach a certain coherent view that works for you, you don't need to go down every single conspiracy theory or convince everyone that, the world's fucked up. You just have to do what you think, it's going to give you the most freedom and the most happiness or whatever. Yeah.
True. Yeah, it's fun, guys.
Cool. All right, chaps. It was a good one. I guess I'll catch you next Tuesday, yeah?
See you later, mate. Take it easy.
See you later, dude.
See you guys.
Ciao, guys.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.